Voices, a fresh perspective on voting,
politics, and power.
Welcome, everybody, to PA Youth Voices, and this week we're going to get down and dirty into judicial elections. So we have one coming up this May, so we're going to fill you in with all the deets and everything you need to know to be an informed voter. Okay, so what we're going to go over today is the format of the judicial elections, historical context, who's on the ballot, and all the latest judicial news, why judicial elections matter, and what you as our listeners can do to help. So let me run down the primaries that are going to be happening down in May. So primary elections in Pennsylvania are typically held on the third Tuesday of May, unless there's a presidential election that year. This year, that day happens to be May 18th, so make sure you guys register to vote. The last day to register to vote for the May elections are May 3rd, and the last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot is May 11th, so keep that in mind. So basically, voters during these elections mainly select a representative that they believe should be their party's candidate to run for that specific elected office. Voters can also vote on constitutional amendments, referendums, ballot questions, and special election contests that coincide with primary elections. And now I'm going to pass it off to Gauri, who's going to specifically tell you what the role of judges are.
Thanks, Sajda. My name is Gauri, and I'll be explaining what the roles of judges are. So before I begin, I want to remind you guys that Pennsylvanians are lucky enough to be able to be one of the few states that are actually allowed to vote for judges. For example, in New Jersey, you can't vote for judges, so make sure you use that right. Make sure you vote for the people that you want to represent you, that make those decisions for you in the courts. So judges are responsible for making sure the law is followed through decisions in court. They hold court proceedings and must remain impartial while interpreting the law. Courts usually address many aspects of education and administration, meaning that elected or appointed judges are also responsible for these decisions that are made in the courts. Additionally, courts decide deadlines and protocols that may vary during uncertain times like COVID-19. So even though judges seem to be at like a higher status, everything that people in government end up choosing for you, it does affect you. So make sure you vote for the right people to represent you, because like I said before, what they decide also affects you no matter what you think. That's why it's also important to vote in every election, because you want to make sure that the right people represent you. And right now I'll be passing it down to Sehaj to talk about the format of judicial elections.
Thanks, Gauri. Hey guys, it's Sehaj. I'm going to be talking about the format of judicial elections. So first of all, judges in Pennsylvania are elected in either retention elections or partisan elections. And Pennsylvania is the only state in the nation that holds its judicial elections solely in odd-numbered years. Pennsylvania is also one of the 14 states with partisan or nonpartisan judicial elections and retention elections. There are also 6 states with judicial retention elections, 23 states that have nonpartisan or partisan judicial elections, and 7 states without judicial elections altogether, like Gauri was saying. So partisan elections of judges is a selection method where candidates are listed on the ballot with an indication of their political party. Some states like Texas and Alabama hold partisan primaries in which Republican and Democratic candidates compete to represent their party in the general election. The first election is partisan, and the following elections after that are retentions. I'm going to jump into the 6 levels of court. First, we have the municipal and magisterial district courts, which are both 6-year terms, and they are responsible for serious criminal cases and whether they go to the Court of Common Plea, preliminary arrangements and preliminary hearings, setting and accepting bail except for murder or voluntary manslaughter. And next, moving on to the Court of Common Plea, which is a 10-year term, and it's responsible for the appeals from minor courts and appeals not exclusively assigned to another court. And lastly, it's involved with matters involving families or children. Next, we have the Commonwealth Court, which is also a 10-year term, and that's responsible for the original civil actions brought by and against the Commonwealth Court, and appeals from decisions made by state agencies and the Court of Common Plea, and this court is actually unique to Pennsylvania. Next, we have the Superior Court, which is also a 10-year term. It's responsible for appeals in criminal and civil cases from the Court of Common Plea. It appeals on matters involving children and families, and is often the final arbiter of legal disputes. Finally, we have the Supreme Court, which is also a 10-year term. And this court reviews requests from the Commonwealth courts and Superior courts, direct appeals from a lower court's decision, requests to intervene in a lower court's proceedings, and requests to deliver a body from illegal detention. And the fun fact about this is that the PA Supreme Court is the oldest appellate court in the nation, dating back to 1684. So now I'm going to pass it on to Maryem.
Thank you, Sehaj. Okay, so my name is Maryem, and I will be talking about the primary elections and the retention elections. So for the primary elections, candidates for the Court of the Common Pleas are allowed to cross-file with major political parties or run in both party primaries. If they win both the Republican and the Democratic primary, they will run unopposed in the general election. Candidates for the Supreme Court and two intermediate courts can only run in one party primary. For retention elections, which are all of the elections after the initial term, they are nonpartisan and they do not compete against another candidate. Voters simply have a yes or no choice on whether to keep them in office for another term. If the candidate gets more yeses than nos, then they are successfully retained. If they get more nos than yeses, then there is a vacancy on the court, and once that judge's term ends. So Samyah will get a little bit into the qualifications and some fun facts about what it's like to be a part of the court system.
Thank you, Maryem. So I am going to talk about actually a lot of different things. So I'm going to start with the qualifications to be a judge. So firstly, you have to be a citizen and you have to be a PA resident for at least 1 year. And that's actually not a long time. So it's kind of flexible there. And you have to be a member of the state bar. And the state bar is actually an association of lawyers and legal attorneys and people in the field who basically want to advocate for justice and for the legislative process and judiciary process to be as equitable and wholesome as possible. And you have to be under the age of 75 and over the age of 21. But certain judges who have the approval of the Supreme Court can be approved to be senior judges in the Commonwealth. And you can be a senior judge until you're 78. So there's that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about judiciary discipline. So judges are like normal people. Well, they're not like normal people. They're definitely not normal people, but judges can get disciplined in their jobs just as anyone else can. They can be removed from office, suspended, or disciplined for misconduct in office. And misconduct can be defined by anything that goes against what's written in the PA Constitution as our judges for, standards for judges. And these are in sections 17 and 18 of the Pennsylvania Constitution. So basically, if an accusee accuses a judge of having some type of misconduct, there can be a conference judge appointed and there will be pretrial activities. And if the accused judge wants to file an omnibus motion, they can challenge this and basically say that whatever they did was not misconduct. So of course they have the right to fight it. And the conference judge can either dismiss the charges or defer it to a court and make it a further process. So basically, judges can get consequences just like anyone else can. And yeah, so any type of misconduct can always be reported. And just a fun fact, judges make $191,926 approximately for a salary. So this is why you really should vote, because you don't want someone who does not deserve it to be making six figures and being a judge. So definitely use your power to determine who becomes a judge. And now Laqueenda is going to give us some history on judges in Pennsylvania.
Now, how and why are the judges in the state of Pennsylvania elected? Before 1838, all judges were appointed by the governor for lifelong terms. However, in 1838, judges began to be appointed by the governor with the consent of the state Senate to serve 15-year terms in the state Supreme Court and 5-year terms in the Courts of Common Pleas. By 1874, all judges were voted in, but the terms they served in increased. By 1968, the Pennsylvania Superior Court and the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court were created. Also in 1968, the Pennsylvania Constitution was amended, allowing judges to be chosen by voters in partisan elections and retained in yes or no retentions, meaning, do you want to keep them or switch them out? Moving forward, who is on the ballot? In the state Supreme Court, a seat held by Justice Thomas Saylor, a registered Republican, expires December 31st, 2021, and will be up for the partisan election on November 2nd. Justice Saylor is the current Chief Justice who was sworn in as such in 2015. He was first elected in 1997. The next Chief Justice will be Max Baer, a registered Democrat who is the next longest-serving justice on the court and was elected in 2003. There will be one partisan election for a seat on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and those running include Judge Maryem McLaughlin, a registered Democrat currently serving as a Superior Court judge, Judge Vic Stable, a registered Republican, also currently serving as a Superior Court judge, and possibly considering running, Judge Kevin Brobson, a registered Republican currently serving in the Commonwealth Court. Now on to Maryem.
For the Commonwealth Court, we have Ann Covey, who's a nonpartisan, and she's incumbent, which means that she is currently in office and up for retention. We have Mara Hannah Leavitt, who's a Republican, and she has not filed for retention. Renee Cohn-Jublier is also nonpartisan, incumbent for re-election, and also Stacey Wallace, a current Republican. There will be one partisan election on the Commonwealth Court, and there will be 2 incumbent yes or no and vote of confidence elections. Those running will be Judge Sierra Thomas Street, a Democrat, and she is running in a partisan election for the open seat she is currently a Philadelphia Common Pleas judge, and her goal is to create a fair and equitable court to resolve disputes with the respect and dignity that everyone rightfully deserves. Also on the ballot will be Mike Dominio, who is a Republican, and he's not on the ballot yet. He's considering running in a partisan election for the open seat as well. He is currently a Widener Law School professor, and he says, quote, "I am assessing whether there would be some interest in my running. There has been some, so I am continuing to do that kind of investigation." Also running is Drew Crompton, a Republican, and he is also running in the partisan election for the open seat. He filled the vacancy earlier this year, and he was a former top GOP lawyer, Grand Old Party lawyer in the state Senate.
Thanks, Maryem. That was so insightful. Hey y'all, it's Anika. So let's talk about the Superior Court. In this court, we have 3 seats open, so we're going to be looking at 3 elections, 2 incumbent elections and 1 partisan. The 2 incumbent elections will be running for retention. A lot of big words here, I know, but put simply, these elections are of incumbents or people who currently hold office who will be running to extend their current service terms. We call that retention. The first incumbent is nonpartisan Mary Jane Bowes from Allegheny County and the Allegheny Bar Association. The second running incumbent is nonpartisan John T. Bender, also from Allegheny County. That third election we mentioned will be the partisan election, due to the seat opened when the current judge, Susan Gantman, announced her plan to retire. This means that the political party of the candidate will be listed on the ballot to help give voters a little more information to base that vote off of. All right, so our first candidate will be Democratic Jill Beck. Working as a current attorney, Jill Beck is a civil litigation lawyer from Allegheny County and worked as a formal judge clerk before switching roles. Next, we have Democratic Judge Tamika Lane. Judge Lane works at the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas and was on the front lines challenging Pennsylvania's restrictive photo ID law, organizing rallies, and drafting legislation to counter its restrictions based on seniors, minorities, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and all of those affected by poverty. Third, there's Democratic Judge Deborah Canty. Like Judge Lane, Judge Canty works as a current judge at the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. And last, but certainly not least, is Democratic Judge Brian Neff. Judge Neff has worked with the Allegheny Bar Association for 15 years, in addition to serving on the Gender Bias Committee.
So thanks, Anika. What I'll be talking about is, in addition to judges on the ballot, there will also be amendments that we'll be able to vote for. So I'll be talking about two of them. The first one being the Equal Rights Regardless of Race or Ethnicity Amendment. Basically, this amendment prohibits denial or abridgment of rights on account of an individual's race or ethnicity under the Pennsylvania Constitution. This amendment will ensure that all people, regardless of their race or ethnicity, will have rights and protection under Article 1 of the Pennsylvania Constitution. The second amendment that will be on the ballot is the Emergency Declarations Amendment. Basically, this amendment addresses the governor's emergency powers, including requiring legislative approval to continue beyond 21 days. This amendment, however, would give more power to state legislators to see what best fits the representatives, and it also takes long to make immediate decisions whenever handling disaster emergencies, including public health emergencies, natural disasters, and more. So we want to make sure that we go over these amendments and see which ones that we want that would best fit our interests and would help us more and would benefit us the best. So right now I'll be passing it down to Sajda to talk about the third amendment that'll be on the ballot.
Thank you, Gauri. So another thing that's going to be on the ballot is the legislative resolution to extend or exterminate emergency declarations. So basically, what this amendment would do is it would empower the legislature to either extend or terminate an emergency declaration by resolution. And so this would allow assemblymen to take immediate action that best fits their constituents. However, on the contrast, it also raises concerns on how such an amendment would play out in terms of being able to be effective in emergency disasters, because any declaration would be required to be affirmed by a concurrent resolution, which could delay any potential disaster response efforts when it's needed the most. But now I'm going to pass it on to Gayatri to explain a couple other things that might be on the ballot.
Thank you, Sajda. I'm Gayatri, and I will be continuing judicial events that will be on the ballot. First, we have the Equal Rights Regardless of Race or Ethnicity Amendment, Emergency Declarations Amendment, and Legislative Resolution to Extend or Terminate Emergency Declaration Amendment, which are all under the same bill, Senate Bill 1166. On January 26, 2021, the Pennsylvania State Senate voted 28-20 to pass the legislation. On February 5th, 2021, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives voted 116-86 to pass the legislation. With approval during 2 legislative sessions, the 3 constitutional amendments were referred to the ballot. In terms of potential ballot measures, we have the Lieutenant Governor Selection Amendment, which is in Senate Bill 133. It provides that candidates for governor pick their lieutenant governor candidate for general election ticket, and a political party's candidates for governor and lieutenant governor must be elected on a joint ticket at the general election. As of 2020, candidates for governor and lieutenant governor run in separate primaries for their party's nomination and then form a joint ticket. The ballot measure would allow a political party's candidate for governor to choose their own candidate for lieutenant governor. The ballot measure would provide that political parties may approve or reject their gubernatorial candidate's pick for lieutenant governor. Then we have the Eliminate Separate Ballot Requirement for Judicial Retentions Election Amendment and No Excuse Absentee Voting Amendment, which is in Senate Bill 413. The ballot measure would amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to eliminate the requirement that judicial retention elections appear on a separate ballot or in a separate column on voting machines from other elections. In addition, the ballot measure would amend constitutional language that addresses absentee voting, including stating that no election can require voters to physically appear at a polling place on election day. It would also include removing the list of excess related to receiving an absentee ballot. Next, we have the infamous House Bill 38, which many lawmakers are trying to fast track. This would call for judges on statewide courts to be voted on in districts instead of at-large elections. This would essentially favor niche interests and give certain political parties the ability to gerrymander the seat. This would be a very dangerous power to restrict the legislature to certain groups. Obviously, gerrymandering, which is the drawing up of voting districts in unusual shapes in order to benefit a certain group, is essentially messing up the concept of checks and balances. To add in a fun history fact in the mix, the US Supreme Court declared racial gerrymandering as an illegal practice in the case Miller versus Johnson from 1995, which deemed racial gerrymandering as a violation of constitutional rights and upheld decisions against redistricting that is based on race. However, gerrymandering that discriminates in other ways is still legal and wreaking havoc on the political and social system. Gerrymandering has been referred to as a legalized form of vote stealing. Our representative democracy is under attack. You need to tell your legislators to vote no on the attempt to gerrymander our elections. Judicial gerrymandering is a power grab that will undermine the independence of our court system. Our judicial system should always remain an independent source of checks and balances for our state government. We cannot allow House Bill 38 to be passed. Once again, you should tell your legislators to vote no on the attempt to gerrymander our judicial elections. No on House Bill 38. The elections need to be decided by the people, not the politicians. In terms of why judges and courts matter in general, as you have learned, judges have so much responsibility, and we need to make sure that judges with our common interests are the ones that are elected. The judicial branch is in charge of interpreting the meanings of laws, applying laws to particular cases, and deciding whether a law breaks the rules of the Constitution, which is regarded as the highest law of our nation. Judges determine important aspects of our community, ranging from civil rights to sustainability to education. Now on to Sehaj with information about what you can do to help.
Hey guys, it's Sehaj again. I'm going to get into some things you guys can do to help. So first of all, you want to make sure you or the people you know who are eligible to register are registered to vote. The link to this can be found in our Instagram bio, even our website, which is payouthvote.org. You want to share all and any information you know or you learn from this podcast, from the news, anywhere with your friends and family who are going to vote. And if they aren't planning on voting, make sure you encourage them and give them some reasons why they should vote. As I mentioned earlier, you can go to our website, which is payouthvote.org. And before you go to vote, make sure you research the judges to make sure that they are representing things that you are interested in. You want to make sure you mark the election dates in your calendar. The primaries are on May 18th, and the last day to register for this is May 3rd. And next week, we will be having Judge Carolyn Nichols, who currently serves on the PA Superior Court. So thank you guys for tuning in this week, and we can't wait to see you next week. Thanks for listening.